I've always believed that peace has a sound. For me, it's the whistle of my old copper kettle and the soft crackle of sunlight filtering through lace curtains. That morning was no different, or so I thought. I set my cup on the table beside the window, watching the robins hop across the frost-tipped lawn. The world outside was calm, untouched by the chaos that would soon unravel inside my heart. Mondays were my routine days. Tea, check the mail, look through my accounts, pay the electricity bill, maybe water the ferns that my late husband Harold planted decades ago. I liked routines. They reminded me that even after loss, life could still be orderly. When Harold passed, I promised myself I'd never depend on anyone financially. He'd worked 35 years at the post office, and together we'd saved every penny, building a modest pension fund that was meant to keep me comfortable in my old age. Nothing fancy, just enough to cover bills, groceries, and perhaps the occasional Sunday church donation. So, like every first Monday of the month, I logged in to check my pension balance. The website loaded slowly, the spinning circle taunting me as I sipped my tea, and then the numbers appeared. Balance 0.0. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I blinked, refreshed the page, even tapped the side of my old laptop as if that would change reality. But the screen stayed the same. 0. I froze. The steam from my cup rose between me and the screen like a ghost, blurring the truth I didn't want to see. I whispered to myself, that can't be right. There should be more than 82,000 in there. My breath caught. The room, once so warm, felt suddenly cold. I checked again. Every transaction, every line item, and then I saw it. A withdrawal. A full transfer. Processed 3 weeks ago. The bank statement read, transfer authorized to joint account ending in 4472. I didn't recognize the number. My hands trembled so hard that the teaspoon clattered against the saucer. A strange, dizzy panic crept up my spine, the kind that comes when your body realizes something terrible before your mind accepts it. Who could have done this? I whispered. Only 2 people had ever helped me with my banking, my daughter, Clara, and her husband, Eric. They'd offered to digitize everything for me last year, saying it was too risky for an old woman to handle online accounts alone. I remember how Eric had smiled as he set up my phone apps. So charming, so sure of himself. He'd even joked, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll make sure you never lose a cent." The irony hit me so hard I almost laughed. For a long while, I just sat there staring at the 0. The seconds felt like hours. My heart wasn't racing. It was too stunned for that. There's a silence that follows betrayal, a silence so heavy it drowns thought itself. I'd trusted them. I'd trusted him. Finally, I reached for my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. I scrolled to Clara's name, my only child, and pressed call. She didn't answer, so I tried again. This time, someone picked up, but it wasn't Clara. It was Eric. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice smooth, practiced. "Everything okay?" My throat tightened. "Eric, my pension account. The balance is gone. It says there was a transfer." "Oh, that," he interrupted lightly, as though I'd asked about the weather. "We took care of it. We invested it for you. You'll thank us later." I sat there in silence, my grip on the phone loosened. Invested it? Without asking me? He chuckled. "Come on, Mom, it's still your money. We just moved it into something smarter. You don't have to worry about all that financial stuff anymore." Something inside me cracked, not loud but sharp, like porcelain splitting. My voice came out calm, colder than I expected. "Eric, I want my money back." He hesitated, then laughed softly. "Relax, Mom. You'll get it back. With interest. We're family. Don't make this awkward." Before I could say another word, the call ended. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the emptiness on the other end. The room felt smaller now. The ticking of the wall clock grew louder, more intrusive, counting down to something I didn't yet understand. For years, I'd believed that aging meant slowing down, letting the younger ones take over. But in that moment, I realized how wrong I'd been. Sometimes, the younger ones aren't caretakers. They're vultures circling, waiting for you to close your eyes long enough to pick your bones clean. I leaned back, staring at the blank laptop screen, at my reflection in it, the face of a woman who'd been quiet too long, and then I whispered, almost to myself, "You invested my money, Eric? How sweet." A small, humorless smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. The police will love that story. Outside, the robins had stopped singing. Even they seemed to know. The storm had begun. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I didn't sleep much the night before. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that number. 0 zeros, like a hole where my security used to be. The kettle's whistle sounded different that day, shrill and uneven. My kitchen, once my sanctuary, felt unfamiliar. I moved through it like a stranger in my own home, setting the cup down on the counter but forgetting the sugar, forgetting the spoon. My mind was somewhere else entirely. Back in that phone call, hearing Eric's smug, careless tone. I told myself to stay calm. Losing your temper never helps when you're dealing with people who think you're weak. And Eric, he was one of those men who thrived on being the smartest person in the room. Always smooth talking, always flashing that salesman smile that made everyone trust him. But not me, not anymore. By 9 o'clock, I called Clara again. This time she answered. Her voice was soft, rushed, the kind you use when someone's standing too close behind you. "Mom, hey, I was just about to call you back." I could hear a man's footsteps in the background. My stomach turned. "Clara, what's going on with my pension account?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. There was a pause, just a few seconds, but it told me everything. "Mom," she began carefully, "Eric told you, didn't he? We invested it for you. It's in a high-yield account, perfectly safe. You'll make double in a few years." I clenched my hands so tightly around the phone that my knuckles turned white. "You invested it? Without telling me? Without my permission?" She sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "Mom, you don't understand these things. Eric's good with money. He's helped so many people." "People like who?" I snapped before I could stop myself. "Because the last time I checked, my money's gone, not growing." Her tone changed immediately, smaller, unsure. "Please don't be upset. Eric said it was for your own good." For my own good. Those words have always been a warning sign in my life, a polite way of saying, "We've made a decision for you." I took a slow breath. "Tell Eric I'll be coming by this afternoon. I want to see where my money is." Her silence was long enough for me to imagine her face. Anxious, darting eyes, lip bitten raw. "Okay, Mom," she finally said, "just don't make a scene." That was when I knew she was scared, not for me, but of him. At 2:30 sharp, I arrived at their house. It was one of those new suburban builds with too much glass and too little soul. The kind of place where everything looks perfect, but you can't smell home-cooked meals, only air freshener and pretense. Eric opened the door before I could knock twice. "Mom," he said with that wide, rehearsed grin, Come in, come in. You didn't have to drive all the way here." His tone was warm, but his eyes, those calculating blue eyes, flicked down to my purse, to the way I clutched it. He was measuring me, even in that moment. I stepped inside. "I wanted to see this investment you mentioned." He laughed lightly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Too familiar, too fake. You don't have to worry about that. Everything's in motion. You'll see results soon." I looked around the room as he spoke. There was a new leather recliner, a brand new TV, even a framed photo of them on a yacht. A yacht. Clara used to say they were saving up for years just to replace the kitchen cabinets. Now they had marble countertops. Something twisted inside me. I forced a smile. "Looks like the investments are already paying off for someone." He chuckled, missing the edge in my tone. "We just decided to live a little. After all, money's meant to be enjoyed, right? Depends on whose money, said softly. He blinked, thrown off for half a second before recovering with another grin. You've got jokes, Mom. I like that. I sat down at their dining table, the same one where I'd eaten Christmas dinner with them last year, laughing, believing this was family. Now the laughter in those memories sounded like betrayal echoing through a hollow room. Eric, I said finally, show me the paperwork. His smile stiffened. Paperwork? For the investment. You said you moved the money to a high-yield account. I'd like to see the details. He shifted uncomfortably, then stood up. Sure, I'll grab it. He left for a moment, then returned with a thin folder that looked freshly printed. Inside were pages full of numbers and fine print, words like equity holdings and projected returns, all gibberish. I could tell at a glance it was nonsense. Still, I pretended to read. Then I looked up and met his eyes. Interesting, I said. I'll have my lawyer take a look. The color drained slightly from his face before he forced a laugh. A lawyer? Come on, Mom, you don't need to get outsiders involved. We're family. Family. That word again, twisted into a leash. I stood slowly, my voice calm but final. You're right, Eric, we are family. That's why I'll give you one chance to make this right before I go to the police. He froze, just for a heartbeat. But I saw it. The mask slipped, his jaw tightened, and for the first time, that easy smile vanished. I walked to the door, turned back, and said, You said you invested my money. I'm about to invest my time in justice. Then I left, letting him stand there, his own silence swallowing him whole. When I got home that evening, the air felt heavier than usual, as though the walls themselves could sense what had been done to me. I placed my purse on the kitchen counter and just stood there, staring at nothing. The quiet tick of the clock filled the room, slow and mocking. I thought about Eric's face, that confident, polished grin that had fooled me for years. But now, every gesture, every helpful thing he'd ever done started replaying in my mind like a puzzle, rearranging itself into something ugly and true. You see, betrayal never comes out of nowhere. It's built one favor at a time. I remembered the first time I met him. Clara had brought him home for dinner, her eyes bright, her laughter soft and nervous. He was charming, too charming. Complimented my cooking, called me Mom before the evening was over. I remember Harold's hand tightening on mine under the table. After they left, he said quietly, That man smiles too much when he's thinking. I brushed it off then. Harold always had a suspicious streak. But now, standing in my kitchen years later, I could still hear his voice echoing in my head like a warning I chose to ignore. After Harold passed, Eric became the man of the house. At least that's what he liked to think. He started by helping me organize bills, saying online banking was easier. Then he convinced Clara to handle my taxes for convenience. Slowly, little by little, they took over things that once gave me independence. It never felt malicious at the time, just concern, wrapped in soft voices and polite smiles. They brought groceries, fixed the Wi-Fi, drove me to doctor appointments. But now I see it for what it was, a quiet conditioning, a way to make me dependent enough to stop asking questions. I went to the living room and opened the small chest where Harold used to keep his old ledgers. Inside was a photo of the three of us, me, Clara, and him, taken just before our 40th anniversary. Clara was in her 20s then, laughing as Harold lifted her hand like a dance partner. She had his kindness once, his light, but Eric dimmed it. I remember the first time I caught him lying. He had lost a gold bracelet that Harold gifted me when we first married, claimed he accidentally sold it in a yard sale while clearing old boxes. I cried that night, but I didn't say a word. It was easier to believe it was a mistake. Now, looking back, I realized that was his test, to see how much I'd tolerate, and I passed it by staying silent. The next day, I started digging. I pulled out my old bank statements, letters, insurance forms, everything. Some were paper, others digital. I had years of receipts neatly filed. Harold taught me to keep records, and for once his old-fashioned habits might just save me. As I spread them across the dining table, one detail caught my eye, a small transfer from my account labeled temporary family adjustment. I remembered asking Clara about it months ago. She told me it was a mistake, a bank error. I believed her. I felt a mix of anger and sorrow wash through me, not just at Eric, but at myself. For all my years of wisdom, I'd let charm blind me. I thought love was enough to protect family bonds, but love without boundaries is an open door for thieves with familiar faces. As dusk settled, I brewed another cup of tea and sat by the window. My reflection looked older than usual, not from age but from awareness, the kind that steals your softness and replaces it with resolve. I whispered into the dimming room, "You took from me thinking I was too old to fight back." The words hung in the air like a vow. My gaze shifted to Harold's portrait above the mantel, that gentle smile frozen in time. I spoke to him softly, the way I always did when I needed strength. "You warned me once, Harold, and I ignored you, but not this time." That night, I didn't sleep much. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, writing down every detail I could remember. Dates, amounts, phone calls, even the way Eric had looked when I mentioned my lawyer. I realized then that I wasn't just a victim. I was a witness. And witnesses can make a case. Before going to bed, I opened my old address book and found a name I hadn't spoken in years, Henry Morton. He'd been Harold's closest friend, a lawyer with a sharp mind and a loyal heart. If anyone could help me sort this mess quietly, it was him. I closed the book and set it beside the teacup. For the first time in days, I felt something small and steady return: control. Eric thought he'd taken everything from me, but he forgot one thing. Old women don't panic. We plan. And my plan had just begun. By the time the sun rose the next morning, I already had my plan. Simple, quiet, deliberate. I wasn't going to rush to the police or shout in anyone's face. People like Eric feed on panic. They count on your fear to make you sloppy. No, I'd give him what he least expected: composure. I ironed my blouse. The blue one Harold always said made my eyes look kind. I wanted to look like the same naive old woman he thought he could manipulate. The calm ones are always underestimated, and I intended to use that to my advantage. At 10 sharp, I called Clara. "Sweetheart," I said, keeping my tone light. "I've been thinking about what you and Eric said. I'd love to come by again. Maybe have lunch, talk through this investment properly." There was hesitation on the other end. I could almost hear her eyes flick toward him before she spoke. "Sure, Mom. Eric will be home for lunch. Come around one?" "Perfect," I said softly. "I'll bring pie." She didn't know that inside that pie box beneath the neatly folded napkins would be a small voice recorder, old-fashioned maybe, but reliable. Harold had once used it to dictate notes for his union meetings. I found it last night in the attic, dusted it off, and changed the batteries. It still worked perfectly. And it was about to work again. When I arrived, Clara greeted me at the door. Her smile was nervous, forced. She hugged me too quickly, then stepped back, glancing behind her. Eric's voice floated in from the living room. "Margaret, you didn't have to bring anything." His tone was cheerful, the same condescending warmth that made my skin crawl. I stepped in and set the pie on the counter. "Oh, nonsense. You two have been so kind, handling my finances and all. The least I can do is bring dessert." He grinned. "You see, honey, I told you your mom's got the biggest heart." I smiled back, but inside I was taking inventory. New furniture, a cream leather couch that wasn't here last month, fresh curtains, the faint smell of new paint. It all screamed money. My money. They'd redecorated their entire house on the back of my life's work. We sat at the table. Eric poured coffee, acting like a host instead of a thief. I pressed record on the device hidden under the napkins, sliding it closer as I unfolded them. "So," I began gently, "tell me again about this wonderful investment." Eric leaned back, always the showman. "Right. Well, it's a long-term fund. Real estate, stock portfolios, a little crypto, just to diversify. You know, things that make your money work for you." "Oh?" I nodded as though impressed. "And where is it now?" He chuckled. "Don't worry about that, Mom. It's all under my management. Safer that way." Clara looked down at her cup. She hadn't said a word since I arrived. "Interesting," I said, stirring my coffee slowly. "And how soon do I start getting reports or returns?" He grinned. "It's all long-term, so we're reinvesting any profit right now. You'll see it later." I smiled sweetly. "I'm sure I will." I could tell by the way his shoulders loosened that he thought he'd won me back over. The arrogance radiated off him, the kind that comes from getting away with too much for too long. After lunch, while Clara went to fetch the pie, Eric leaned forward, his voice softening. "Listen, Margaret, I know you were upset, but we did this to protect you. Inflation's brutal these days. I'm making sure you have more down the road." I tilted my head. "So you're managing my money personally?" "Exactly. You don't have to lift a finger. I've already moved the funds through my business account for easier handling." There it was, his confession, smooth as butter, right into the recorder. I smiled politely. "You've always been so helpful." He laughed. "Just taking care of family." Family. That word used to mean warmth. Now it sounded like theft wrapped in sentiment. When I finally stood to leave, Clara walked me to the door. Her voice cracked slightly. "Mom, are you okay?" I looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes were swollen the way they used to get after crying. She wasn't part of this scheme, not fully. She was just caught between love and loyalty, trapped like a bird in someone else's cage. "I'm fine, darling," I said gently, brushing her arm. "I'm just trying to understand how things work these days." She nodded, but her lips trembled. Eric says, "A lot of things," I interrupted softly. "Maybe it's time you started saying your own." Her gaze fell, and for a brief second I saw something flicker. Guilt. Maybe even realization. I left before she could answer. Driving home, I felt the first ember of satisfaction. I had his words, his arrogance, his lies, all neatly captured. The tape recorder sat beside me on the passenger seat, blinking its small red light like a heartbeat. Harold used to tell me, "Don't raise your voice, raise your evidence." And that's exactly what I intended to do. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I already knew my next step. I'd call Henry, the old lawyer with the sharp eyes and the even sharper memory. It was time to turn this quiet storm into a case. The next morning I woke up before dawn, the sky still gray and heavy with the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. I'd hardly slept, but not from fear, from clarity. Once your eyes finally open to who people truly are, you can't close them again. I sat with my tea, watching the condensation on the window pane trail down like tiny rivers. The world outside looked ordinary, but I knew everything had changed. The tape recorder sat on the table beside me, silent but powerful. A single piece of truth in a web of lies. At 9, I called Henry Morton. He'd been one of Harold's oldest friends. A lawyer for small businesses and families, retired now but sharp as ever. I hadn't spoken to him since Harold's funeral, but I still had his number written in my address book, neat and clear in Harold's handwriting. The phone rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "Margaret Hale, I'll be damned. I thought you'd forgotten all about old men like me." "Never," I said softly, though my throat tightened with emotion. "Henry, I need your help." Something in my tone must have told him this wasn't a social call. His voice straightened. "What happened?" I told him everything. The zero balance, Eric's investment, Clara's silence, The fake paperwork, the new furniture, the way he'd admitted moving the money through his business account. Henry didn't interrupt once. I could almost hear his pen scratching against paper. When I finished, he let out a long breath. "You said he moved the money into his account?" "Yes." "Without written consent?" "No, nothing at all." There was a low whistle. "That's not investment, Margaret. That's misappropriation of funds. And since it's a retirement account, we're talking federal charges. Fraud, embezzlement, elder financial abuse." I felt my pulse steady as he spoke. His words didn't scare me. They fortified me. Finally, someone was naming the crime for what it was. He continued, "Now listen carefully. Don't confront him again. Don't tell Clara what you're doing. Keep every message, every receipt, every piece of paper. Make copies. And Margaret—" "Yes?" "Start a new account. Somewhere they don't know. Move any remaining assets you control. You need to protect yourself immediately." "I will," I said quietly. "Good," he replied. "We'll build a file. I'll call a friend in the local police department who handles financial crimes. But first, I need you to gather evidence. Transactions, screenshots, texts, anything that proves he had access and motive." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I already started." He chuckled under his breath. "Knew you would. Harold always said you were the steel behind his smile." That line brought tears to my eyes. He used to say that, didn't he? Every time. We set a meeting for the next afternoon. I hung up, exhaling deeply. For the first time in days, I felt something close to hope. Not the soft, wishful kind, but the quiet, determined kind that sharpens with age. The rest of the day was a blur of papers and printer ink. I spent hours digging through bank statements, transaction logs, even emails I hadn't opened in months. Each time I found another transfer labeled under Eric's name, I felt the anger rise, not burning but cold and clean. He had been moving my funds little by little over the past year, hiding it under friendly labels like family support and shared investment. I printed every page, highlighted every deceitful line, and neatly stacked them in a folder. At one point, I stopped to rest, my back aching. I looked at Harold's portrait again. He was smiling that soft, patient smile he always wore when I got fired up about something. "You'd be proud of me, Harold," I whispered. "I'm not letting them get away with this." By evening, I had enough evidence to fill a small briefcase. I placed the voice recorder on top, labeling it with today's date. Then I sat back and watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the room gold and quiet. The phone rang again, Clara this time. I hesitated before answering. "Mom," she said softly. "Eric's been worried. He said you were acting strange yesterday." "Strange?" I said calmly. "No, dear, just reflective." She sighed, relief in her tone. "Okay, I just wanted to make sure you're not upset." "Oh, I'm past upset, Clara. I'm thinking now." She hesitated. "About what?" "About how trust works, how it's earned, how it's lost." Silence. I could hear her swallow. "Mom, please don't do anything dramatic. Eric says—" I cut her off gently. "Eric says a lot of things. I've decided to start listening to myself for once." "Mom, good night, darling." I hung up before she could reply. The next morning, I dressed neatly and walked to Henry's small home office. He greeted me with a firm handshake and eyes that missed nothing. As I laid out the papers, his expression darkened. "This is solid," he said, flipping through the pages. "You've built a better case than some detectives I know." I smiled faintly. "Old women have patience and long memories." He looked up at me, impressed. "I'll file the preliminary report, but Margaret, you'll need to be ready. Once this starts, it won't be quiet. He'll panic and Clara will get caught in the middle." "I know," I said, steady. "But I can't protect her by pretending anymore." Henry nodded slowly. "You've got grit. Harold would be proud." That made me smile for real. the first genuine smile I'd had in days. As I left his house, the morning light caught the edge of my folder, and something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about dignity, about every woman who'd ever been dismissed, talked over, or robbed under the banner of family. Eric thought I was too old to fight. He was about to learn I'd been training my whole life. Henry always said, the best evidence isn't loud. It's quiet, ordinary, hiding in plain sight. Those words echoed in my head for the next few days. I didn't call Clara. I didn't call Eric. Instead, I slipped back into my routines, moving through my days with the stillness of someone who's been underestimated one time too many. I watered my plants, went for morning walks, baked pies, smiled at neighbors, and collected every digital breadcrumb Eric had ever left behind. The first clue came from an unlikely place, my email inbox. Between newsletters and grocery receipts, I found automated notifications from my bank that had gone unread. I opened one, dated nearly 7 months ago. Transaction alert, $2,500 transferred to account ending in 4472. Then another 3 months later, $3,000 withdrawn for property venture. The descriptions were vague, deliberate. Eric had labeled every withdrawal to sound legitimate. But the more I scrolled, the clearer the pattern became. Monthly deductions, irregular amounts, all leading to that same joint account. Joint account. My name wasn't on it. I printed each email and tucked them neatly into a new folder labeled Evidence. Phase 2. Henry had told me to document everything, so I did. Screenshots, printed bank alerts, even the text messages Eric sent with his usual arrogance. One read, "Trust me, Mom. I've got your money in a safe investment. Way better than letting it rot in a low-interest pension." I highlighted that line in yellow. Then another message, 2 weeks later. "Don't go checking the balance every day. These things take time, patience." That one I highlighted in red. I didn't respond to any of them. Silence was my weapon now. By Thursday, I'd gathered enough proof to bury him in his own words. Still, I wanted more. Something personal, something undeniable. That evening, I called Clara. My voice was gentle, casual. "Sweetheart, I was thinking about your investment idea. Eric seemed so confident. Could he explain it to me again? Maybe help me understand the returns?" She hesitated. "Mom, I don't think—" "Oh, don't worry," I interrupted softly. "I'm not upset. I just want to learn. Maybe I'll even tell my church group about it. They've been asking how to make their savings grow." That got her. I could hear her breathing shift. "Okay, I'll tell Eric you want to talk." "Lovely," I said. "Tomorrow afternoon works best." After I hung up, I exhaled slowly. Tomorrow, I'd get what Henry called verbal corroboration, a confession, plain and simple. But this time, I'd make him say it twice. When the next day came, I wore my soft pink sweater and brought over a plate of homemade biscuits. People underestimate you faster when you come bearing sweets. Eric was in the living room, laptop open, pretending to be busy. "Mom," he said, flashing that artificial smile. "More treats? You're spoiling us." "Just something small," I said, placing the biscuits down. "I wanted to ask a few more questions about the investment. My church ladies were curious." He grinned, puffing up with pride. "Of course. I can explain it all. You see, your money isn't gone. It's just in motion. Think of it as working for you, not sitting idle." I nodded, pulling my phone from my purse and setting it casually on the table, camera pointed his way. "That's fascinating. So, where exactly is it right now?" "In my company's holdings," he said without hesitation. "That's where I manage all the accounts. Easier to move it around, less paperwork." I feigned confusion. "So technically, it's under your name?" He laughed. "For now, yes. But don't worry, Mom. You'll get the profits when I cash out." Every word was golden. Pure, self-incriminating gold. I smiled warmly. "You've always been so good with numbers, Eric. Harold would have admired that." He smirked. "See? I told Clara your mom's a smart woman." "Smarter than you think," I said quietly. He didn't catch it. He just kept talking, boasting about market trends, real estate flips, tax breaks, things he clearly didn't understand well enough to pull off legally. My phone caught every syllable. When I left, I thanked them both, hugged Clara tight, and said I'd drop by next week. On my way home, my heart pounded, not from fear, but from satisfaction. I parked in my driveway, opened the voice recorder app, and replayed his words. Clear as daylight. "It's in my company's holdings. For now, yes, under my name." I closed my eyes and let out a long, steady breath. It was done. That night, I called Henry. "Got it," I said simply. He didn't even ask what. "Perfect. Email me the file and bring your folders tomorrow morning. I'll have the detective meet us here, quietly." I sat at my kitchen table, looking at the pile of documents and my glowing phone screen. For the first time since this began, I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous. Eric had built his little empire on the assumption that I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't understand. But understanding wasn't my weakness. Patience was my power. I looked at Harold's photo, the faintest smile crossing my lips. "They think I'm old, Harold," I whispered. "They forget. Old doesn't mean done." Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It was here. The next few days passed in slow, deliberate rhythm. I went about my business as though nothing had changed. Visited the grocery store, chatted with the neighbors, even attended Sunday service, nodding and smiling while inside I was counting the hours. Henry and the detective had what they needed: the transfers, the printed messages, and the recordings. Now, it was time for the final piece. The part where Eric revealed himself without realizing the stage had already been set. It was almost poetic that it happened on my birthday. Clara called 2 days before. "Mom, we're having a small dinner for you. Just family. Eric thought it'd be nice after everything." I smiled faintly. That's thoughtful of him. She sounded relieved that I wasn't angry. I could almost hear her shoulders relax. "Good. I'll make your favorite lemon cake." "That sounds lovely, sweetheart," I said softly. "Tell Eric I'm looking forward to seeing what he's invested my money in." There was a pause, just long enough for me to know she didn't catch the edge beneath my words. When the evening arrived, I dressed in Harold's favorite outfit of mine, a soft cream cardigan, pearl earrings, and the gold cross pendant he'd given me on our 20th anniversary. It always gave me courage somehow. As I approached their house, I noticed more signs of their newfound wealth. A brand new car in the driveway, an expensive outdoor grill, string lights twinkling along the patio. My pension money was glowing in every bulb. Clara greeted me with a warm hug. She looked tired, worn, but her eyes had a softness I hadn't seen in weeks. Eric followed behind her, smiling like a politician. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, handing me a bouquet of roses. "You don't look a day over 50, I chuckled lightly. "Oh, flattery now, is it? I must be richer than I thought." He laughed, not catching the double meaning. We sat down to dinner. The table was beautiful. Candles, polished silverware, and that lemon cake sitting proudly in the center. I looked around and thought how strange it was. The same room that had once felt so warm now felt staged, like a showroom for deceit. Eric poured wine, raising his glass. "To Margaret, the woman who made all this possible." My eyes lingered on him. "Yes," I said softly, clinking my glass against his. "You have no idea how true that is." Clara smiled nervously. "Mom, we wanted tonight to be special. You've done so much for us." "Oh, I know," I said, my voice calm even. "You've both certainly made use of what I've done." Eric shifted slightly, laughing a bit too loudly. "She's teasing again," I smiled. "Am I?" The silence that followed was subtle, but I could feel it tighten around the table. I cut a small piece of cake, the silver fork glinting under the chandelier. Then I set it down and looked directly at him. "Tell me, Eric, I began gently. How are the investments going? Still in your company's holdings? His hand froze halfway to his glass. What? He said, his tone faltering for the first time. You mentioned it last week, I continued, that my funds were under your name, for easier handling. How's that working out? Clara's eyes widened. Mom, I didn't look at her. I kept my gaze on him. You said it yourself, didn't you? For now, yes, under my name. The color drained from his face. I reached into my purse and placed a small USB drive on the table, sliding it across the polished wood. That's your voice, Eric. Every word of it, along with the bank records, text messages, and those fake investment papers you showed me. The detective loved your confidence. He blinked, utterly still. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Detective? She whispered. Eric tried to recover, forcing a shaky laugh. This is ridiculous, Margaret. You're confused. You probably recorded something out of context. I interrupted him, my tone sharp but measured. No, Eric, you took everything my husband and I saved over a lifetime. You stole it, dressed it in fancy words, and called it love. But here's the thing. Lies don't age well. He opened his mouth to argue, but the sound of footsteps from the front door stopped him. The doorbell rang once. Clara turned toward it, her face pale. Eric muttered, "Who's that?" I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands calmly. That would be Detective Walsh. He and Henry thought they might join us for dessert. Eric's glass slipped from his hand, wine spilling across the tablecloth like blood spreading through fabric. The knock came again, firmer this time. Clara looked between us, trembling. Eric, what did you do? He stood up, his voice breaking. I can fix this. I'll transfer it back. But before he could take another step, the detective's voice came from the doorway. Eric Donovan, you're under investigation for financial fraud and unauthorized use of pension funds. Eric's face went ghost white. He didn't speak, didn't even breathe. I looked at him, my tone gentle, almost kind. You invested my money, Eric? How sweet. The police will love that story. Clara began to sob softly, covering her face. The detective motioned for Eric to step aside, reading him his rights as the night air from the open door swept into the room, cooling everything. I stayed seated, composed, watching the man who'd stolen from me realize his empire was built on paper and arrogance. As the officers led him away, he glanced back once, his voice trembling. You did this? I nodded slowly. No, Eric, you did. The house felt emptier the moment the police left. Their footsteps faded down the walkway, and the front door clicked shut, leaving behind only silence. That heavy kind of silence that follows truth when it's finally been spoken aloud. Clara stood frozen by the table, her face pale and streaked with tears. The birthday candles still flickered on the cake, melting into small pools of wax. I watched one of them bend and fall, a thin trail of smoke rising from the icing. That was the image that would stay with me. How quietly something beautiful can collapse. Eric's wine glass lay shattered on the floor, the red stain creeping across the tile like a wound. I didn't bother cleaning it. Some messes need to sit for a while, to remind you of what's been broken. For a long minute, neither of us spoke. Then Clara finally whispered, "You called the police on him." I turned toward her slowly. "No, Clara, I called the police for you." Her lip trembled. "He said he was helping you. He said it was an investment that you'd be grateful." I stepped closer. "And when I told you my account was empty, what did you feel?" She blinked, looking lost. "Scared." "Scared of what, Clara?" She hesitated. "Of him." The words came out small, like something she'd been holding in for years. I could see it then, all of it. The way her shoulders hunched, the way she always glanced toward him before speaking, the way her laughter had become quieter over the years. She hadn't just lost my trust, she'd lost herself inside his control. I took her hands gently in mine. "Sweetheart, he didn't just take my money. He took your voice, and now you get to take it back." She started to cry. Not the quiet kind this time, but the kind that comes from the bottom of a soul that's been aching for too long. She sank into a chair, covering her face, her sobs shaking her shoulders. I didn't stop her. Sometimes tears are the first kind of healing. The next few days moved like pages turning themselves. The investigation was swift. Henry and Detective Walsh handled everything with quiet precision. Eric's business account showed direct transfers from my pension, over $80,000 in total, most of it already spent on luxuries, vacations, and business expenses. There was even a down payment for a property in his name, though it hadn't closed yet. That meant recovery was still possible. Henry called me one afternoon. "The good news, Margaret, he'll face charges. Fraud, embezzlement, elder exploitation. It's airtight. The DA's office is already preparing the case." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "And the funds?" "Most of it will come back. He liquidated assets recently. The court can freeze what's left. It'll take time, but you'll get it." I closed my eyes, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Margaret," Henry added, his voice softening, "you did the right thing. You know that, right?" "I know," I said quietly, "but right doesn't always feel good." That night, I found Clara sitting on my porch. She'd driven over unannounced, her eyes red but clearer than I'd seen them in years. She held a small box in her hands. "Mom," she said softly, "I wanted to return this." It was the gold bracelet, my bracelet, the one I thought was lost years ago. My breath caught. "Where did you—" "I found it in Eric's drawer," she said. I knew then. This wasn't new. He's been stealing from you for years. And from me, too. Just in different ways. I took the bracelet and ran my fingers over its engraved clasp. It was cold at first, then slowly warmed against my skin, like forgiveness waiting to be found. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have stopped him." I shook my head. "He was a storm, Clara. You don't stop a storm. You survive it. And now, it's over." She started to cry again, quieter this time. I pulled her into my arms. For a long time, neither of us said a word. The night breeze carried the faint smell of rain and lilacs from the garden, and for once, the silence didn't hurt. The next morning, I received a call from Detective Walsh. "We've got him in holding," he said. "He tried to claim it was a misunderstanding, but the evidence, your recordings, the bank trail, it's solid. He confessed after a few hours." "Confessed?" "Yes," said it started as a temporary borrowing that got out of hand, typical rationalization. But it's over now. I thanked him, hung up, and stood at the window for a while. The sun was spilling across the yard, lighting up the roses Harold had planted decades ago. Justice doesn't always come roaring like thunder. Sometimes it arrives quietly, steady, methodical, patient. That evening, I lit a candle by Harold's photo and whispered, "It's done." I didn't feel triumphant, just clean, like I'd finally rinsed the last traces of rot from something sacred. Clara came by again the next day, her face softer, lighter. We sat on the porch, watching the sun set. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "What will you do now, Mom?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "Live, the way I was meant to, without fear, without anyone calling theft an investment." She nodded, her eyes wet but hopeful. The porch was quiet except for the sound of crickets, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt peace return to my bones. They called me down to the precinct a few days later, not because they needed more evidence, but because Detective Walsh thought I should hear it for myself. "Closure," he'd said. "Sometimes hearing the lies collapse out loud helps the healing start." The building was colder than I expected. Sterile walls, humming lights, the faint scent of disinfectant, the kind of place where truth is stripped bare and left with nowhere to hide. Walsh met me in the hallway, his expression calm but kind. "He's in there," he said, nodding toward the small room with the one-way glass. "You don't have to watch, but most people want to." I nodded. "I came this far. I might as well see the rest. He led me to the observation window. Inside sat Eric, slumped in a metal chair, the sleeves of his expensive shirt rolled up, his hair uncombed. He looked smaller now, his usual swagger gone. There was a coffee cup in front of him, untouched. Across the table sat Henry and another detective. A recorder blinked red between them. For a moment, I just stared. I thought I'd feel hate, maybe satisfaction. But what I felt was something simpler. Distance. The kind that comes when you finally see someone without the disguise you once mistook for love. Walsh pressed a small button on the console beside the glass. The recording came through clear as day. "Eric," Henry's voice said evenly, "we have the transfers, the account records, the messages, and your statements to Mrs. Hale. You moved pension funds that weren't yours into your company's account. That's felony fraud." Eric exhaled sharply, his voice shaky. "I wasn't stealing. I was trying to help her. I meant to pay it back." Henry leaned forward. "With what? The luxury car? The new furniture? The cruise tickets?" Eric's hands clenched. "It got complicated, all right. I just wanted to grow the money and then the market dipped. I was going to fix it before she noticed." Walsh, watching from beside me, murmured, "They always say that." Inside the room, the detective across from him asked, "Did Mrs. Hale ever give you written permission to access her pension funds?" "No, but—" "So you admit you acted without authorization?" Eric swallowed. I thought she trusted me." Henry's voice hardened. "Trust isn't a contract, Eric. It's a mirror. You shattered it." There was a long silence. Then Eric spoke again, quieter this time. "It's not all my fault," Clara knew. I felt my body tense. Walsh glanced at me, his brow raised, ready to step in if needed, but I just watched. Inside the room, Henry's tone stayed measured. What exactly did Clara know? Eric shifted, eyes darting. "She knew about the transfers. She said it was fine, said her mom wouldn't care if the money was safe." I could see the lie form as he said it, the twitch at the corner of his mouth, the way he wouldn't meet Henry's eyes. Henry slid a folder across the table. "Funny thing, Eric. Your wife came in yesterday, signed a full statement. She said she believed every word you told her until the night you were arrested. She didn't know a thing about those transfers." Eric froze. Henry leaned closer. "So, do you want to add perjury to your list?" Eric's shoulders sagged, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw fear. Not anger, not arrogance, but pure, cold fear. I just wanted control," he muttered. "She never respected me. Her money was always there, reminding me that I had nothing. I thought if I handled it, if I made it mine—" His voice trailed off. Walsh turned to me, his tone soft. "You still think you want to hear more?" I shook my head. "No, I've heard enough." Outside the room, I sat on the bench in the hallway while Walsh went to wrap things up. My hands trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from release. For years, I'd felt powerless, too polite to question, too trusting to suspect. But now, I felt something stronger than anger. Peace, through clarity. Henry came out a few minutes later. He's going to accept a plea deal. He knows the evidence is too strong. I nodded slowly. "Good." He studied me for a moment. "You handled this with grace, Margaret. Most people would have lost their temper long before now." I smiled faintly. "That's the trick with people like him. They expect you to scream. They don't know what to do when you stay calm." Henry chuckled quietly. "Harold used to say the same thing about you." I looked up at him. He was a wise man. "That he was," Henry agreed. We stood in silence for a moment. Then he said softly, "You know, justice doesn't always mean winning in court. Sometimes it's just about knowing the truth survived." I nodded. "And about making sure they can't hurt anyone else." When I got home, the first thing I did was open the curtains. The afternoon light poured in, warm and bright, touching every corner of my living room. I brewed myself a fresh cup of tea and sat by the window, the same place where this all began. The same quiet morning I'd discovered my account empty. Except this time, it wasn't emptiness I felt. It was closure. I whispered, "He confessed, Harold. It's over now." Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of church bells from down the street, soft, steady, and certain. Justice doesn't heal the wound, I thought, but it stops the bleeding. And that, for now, was enough. The next morning, there was a gentle knock at my door. Not hurried, not timid, just soft, rhythmic, like someone hoping the sound alone might earn forgiveness. I already knew who it was before I opened it. Clara stood there, eyes swollen, hands trembling around a small paper bag. She looked like she hadn't slept. The woman who once filled a room with laughter now looked smaller, her shoulders curved inward, as if years of misplaced loyalty had finally caught up to her. "Morning, Mom," she whispered. I stepped aside and let her in. "Come in, sweetheart, sit." She hesitated before crossing the threshold, like guilt itself was a physical barrier she had to push through. I poured her tea without asking. That was something mothers do. Even when their hearts are torn, their hands still serve love by habit. She held the cup but didn't drink. Her gaze stayed fixed on the steam. "I went to see him," she said finally. Her voice was a whisper, cracked at the edges. "They're keeping him in county jail until the hearing. He looked different." I nodded slowly. "Prison uniforms tend to do that." She winced. "Mom." I softened my tone. "I'm not being cruel, Clara, just honest." She swallowed hard. "He asked me to tell you he's sorry." I stirred my own tea, the spoon tapping softly, against porcelain. "Sorry doesn't refill a pension account." Clara blinked back tears. "He said he never meant for it to go this far." "Of course he didn't," I murmured. "Men like him never mean to burn the house down. They just keep playing with matches until the flames catch." Her lips trembled. "I believed him, Mom. Every word. I thought he was protecting you." I looked up, meeting her eyes. "I know." The silence that followed wasn't hostile, just heavy, like rain pressing against glass. Finally, she whispered, "You must hate me." That broke something inside me. The fragility of that question, the child hidden inside the woman who once sat at this same table drawing pictures with crayons while I cooked dinner. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. Her skin was cold. "No, Clara, I don't hate you. I hate what he made you believe about yourself, about me." Tears welled up in her eyes. She turned away, ashamed. "I watched you change after you married him," I said quietly. "You stopped laughing the same way. You stopped visiting unless he came with you. And every time I saw that nervous smile, the one you're wearing right now, I knew something was wrong." She sniffled. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I did, once. Remember when I told you, love doesn't mean shrinking to fit someone else's comfort? You said I was being dramatic." Her tears spilled over. "I didn't want to believe you." "I know," I said gently, "but sometimes the only way to see a lie is to watch it fall apart." She reached into the paper bag she'd brought and pulled out an envelope, thick, worn at the corners. "The court's returning part of your funds already. Henry called me. I wanted to give this to you myself." She placed it on the table. I didn't open it. Money wasn't the point anymore. "Thank you," I said softly. Clara nodded, wiping her cheeks. "I've also decided to sell the house." That caught me off guard. "Sell the house?" "It was never really ours, not after what he did with it. I can't live there, Mom, not with his things, his smell, his shadow on every wall. I want to start over. Somewhere small, quiet, maybe near you if you'd let me." Something deep inside me loosened, like a knot coming undone. "You don't need my permission to come home, Clara." She looked up, tears brimming again. You'd really want me around? After all this? I smiled faintly. You're my daughter. I gave you life, not a lease. You don't expire when you make mistakes. That broke her completely. She got up and came around the table, collapsing into my arms. Her body shook as she cried. Not polite tears, but the kind that empty you out, make room for something new. I held her, smoothing her hair the way I used to when she was little and scraped her knees. Shh, I whispered. It's all right now. It's over. We stayed like that for a long time until her breathing steadied. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were swollen but lighter, her face softer. You're stronger than I ever realized. I shook my head. No, sweetheart. I just learned the difference between anger and resolve. Anger burns you up. Resolve lights the way. She smiled through her tears. You always did talk in lessons. Old habit, I said. Wisdom gets louder the older you get, mostly because no one listened the first time. We both laughed, quietly, gently. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was the first sound of healing. That evening, after she left, I found myself standing by the window again, watching the twilight settle over the street. The air smelled of jasmine. The world, for the first time in months, felt still. I traced the bracelet around my wrist, the one she'd returned to me, and whispered, She's finding her way back, Harold. I think we both are. In that moment, I realized revenge hadn't restored my peace. Forgiveness had. Not for Eric. He could face his own judgment. But for Clara, and for myself. Because surviving betrayal isn't just about getting even. It's about refusing to let someone else's deceit rewrite your story. And my story, finally, was mine again. 3 weeks later, I received an envelope in the mail from Henry, the kind of thick, official one that makes your pulse quicken before you even open it. The letterhead read, County Court, Financial Restitution Order. Inside was a short letter in Henry's tidy handwriting. Margaret, the court has completed the first stage of asset recovery. Attached is the transfer confirmation. Most of your pension funds are being returned to your new account as of today. You've done it. Justice served. Quietly but completely. Congratulations, my friend. I set the papers down on my table, my fingers tracing the embossed seal. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but the truth was, I felt something gentler than joy, something deeper than relief. I felt peace. For so long, my world had been a circle of worry and betrayal. Now that circle was open again, letting light in. The balance wasn't what it used to be, but it was enough. Enough to live comfortably. Enough to remind me that not every theft leaves you empty. Sometimes it leaves you wiser. That evening, I brewed a pot of tea and called Clara. Her voice was steadier now, lighter, as if she'd been exhaling grief in small pieces every day. They sent it, Mom, she asked. They did. Thank God. I smiled faintly. Yes, though I think he already knew. She chuckled softly, the kind of sound I hadn't heard from her in years. What are you going to do with it? I looked out the window at the garden. The late afternoon sun draped everything in a soft golden haze, the kind that makes even the old wooden fence glow. I've been thinking about that, I said. Not all of it is meant to come back to me. What do you mean? Harold and I always said money is just a tool. It's not meant to sit. It's meant to move, to build, to heal. She was quiet on the line. I could hear the realization in her silence, the kind that makes a daughter see her mother not as an old woman, but as someone who never stopped being strong. A week later, I walked into the local women's shelter downtown, the same one I'd volunteered at years ago after Harold died. They'd fallen on hard times recently, relying mostly on donations to stay open. The manager, a kind woman named Ruth, recognized me immediately. Margaret, I can't believe it's you. We haven't seen you since before the pandemic. I smiled, handing her a folded check. Consider this a little help from someone who knows what it's like to start over." She opened it and gasped softly. "Margaret, this is generous." I shrugged. "It's just a bit of money. But for some women, it could mean a new door, a safe bed, a chance." Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, truly." I touched her hand. "Don't thank me. Thank the lesson life tried to teach me. I just decided to learn it the expensive way." When I returned home that evening, Clara was waiting on my porch with 2 cups of coffee and a shy smile. "I heard what you did," she said. "The donation. Word travels fast." "Ruth called me," she admitted. "Said she hasn't seen anyone give like that in a long time." I shrugged lightly. "It's not about giving, sweetheart. It's about letting go. Holding on too tight to money only makes you its prisoner. I've been one long enough." Clara smiled, tears welling in her eyes again. "You've always been better than the people who wronged you." I shook my head. "No, just older. I've had more practice being disappointed." That made her laugh through her tears. The next morning, I walked through my house. Really walked. For weeks, I'd been moving through it mechanically, but that day, every creak of the floorboard, every soft breeze through the curtains felt alive again. I stopped at Harold's photo on the mantel. His smile still had that quiet strength in it, like he knew this day would come. "I did it, Harold," I whispered. "Not just for the money, for the peace." I fastened the gold bracelet around my wrist, the one Eric once stole, and felt the weight of it settle against my skin. It no longer felt like a symbol of loss. It felt like a promise kept. Later that afternoon, I went out to my garden. The soil was rich and dark, the air heavy with the scent of rain. I knelt down beside Harold's old rose bushes and began trimming the wilted blooms. The new buds were already forming beneath, small, strong, certain. Clara came up behind me with a watering can. "Need help?" I smiled. "Always." We worked quietly side by side, the kind of silence that speaks louder than words, the silence of understanding, of forgiveness shared. After a while, she said softly, "You could have let this destroy you, Mom." I looked at her, wiping dirt from my hands. "Or I could let it rebuild me. Life doesn't take from you without offering something back, if you're brave enough to see it." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "What did it give you?" "Clarity," I said, "and you." As the sun set, the sky turned a soft pink and gold, the color of old photographs and second chances. The roses glowed in the fading light, and I thought of how even things once broken can bloom again. I stood, brushed the soil from my knees, and whispered almost to myself, "Sometimes the best investment is in someone else's new beginning." Morning sunlight spilled through the lace curtains like liquid gold, painting soft patterns across my kitchen table. The same table where this whole story began, with a cup of tea, an empty account, and a woman who thought her life was winding down. Now, that same woman sat with her head held high, her heart lighter, her world smaller but richer in the ways that mattered most. It's strange how life loops back on itself, how something that starts as loss can end as liberation. I looked around my house, my home, and for the first time in months it felt like it belonged to me again, not because of the papers that proved it, but because of the peace that filled it. The police, the lawyers, the courts, they'd done their jobs. Eric's case was still moving through the system. Henry said there'd likely be prison time and financial restitution, but I didn't care about the sentence. My justice wasn't in handcuffs or numbers. My justice was sitting right here, in the quiet. Sometimes silence is the sound of victory. Clara came by that afternoon with groceries, her hair tied back, her face calm. She'd been spending more time with me lately, cooking, gardening, laughing again. The heaviness she used to carry had started to fade, like dust shaken off after a long storm. "Mom," she said, unpacking fruit into the bowl. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't checked your account that morning?" I smiled faintly. "All the time. I think I would have kept living in comfort, just not truth. And I'd rather be poor in peace than rich in deception." She nodded, quiet for a moment. "You were brave." I shook my head. "No, darling. I was just tired. And sometimes being tired of pain is enough to make you brave." She came over and hugged me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder like she used to when she was a child. "I'm learning that from you." I placed my hand over hers. Then I did something right. Later, after she left, I took my tea out to the porch. The evening air was soft, the kind that hums with crickets and the faint rustle of leaves. Across the yard, the rose bushes Harold planted stood in full bloom, pink, white, and deep red. He used to call them his 3 moods of love. I smiled at the memory. "You'd laugh if you saw me now, Harold," I murmured. "You always said I was too gentle for this world. Guess you were half wrong." The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of roses. Maybe that was his way of answering. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the humiliation, the fight to reclaim what was mine. But when I stripped it all down, what remained wasn't bitterness. It was something purer. I'd learned that trust isn't weakness, but trusting without boundaries is. I'd learned that age doesn't make you invisible unless you let it. And I'd learned that the most dangerous kind of thief isn't the one who takes your money, but the one who convinces you that you can't live without them. I lifted my teacup to my lips, the rim warm against my skin. "Here's to survival," I whispered, "to second chances, to still having a voice when they thought I'd lost it." As the sun began to dip, the world turned that honey-colored hue that only evening light can create. Soft, forgiving, almost sacred. I thought back to that first day, how I'd sat right here, stunned by the sight of my empty account, how helpless I'd felt, and how easy it would have been to accept it, to say nothing, to let fear swallow me whole. But life has a funny way of waking you up when it needs you most. I didn't fight back because I wanted revenge. I fought because every woman like me, every mother, widow, sister, and friend, deserves to know that strength doesn't retire with age, that quiet people aren't weak, that calm is not surrender, it's control. I stood up, stretching my back, and looked out at the garden one more time. The evening light glowed across the roses, touching their petals like forgiveness itself. I smiled softly. "You thought I wouldn't fight, Eric," I whispered into the dusk. "But I did, and I won, not because I hurt you, but because I found myself again." A bird flew low across the yard, its wings flashing gold in the light. Somewhere far off, a church bell rang, slow and sure. I closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me. When I opened them again, I wasn't the same woman who'd once stared at a screen full of zeros. I was the woman who'd turned that emptiness into purpose, that betrayal into clarity, that fear into fire. And as the first stars began to appear, I lifted my cup once more and whispered, not to the world, but to myself. They thought I was finished, but I was just getting started. The crickets sang, the roses swayed, and I sat back in my chair. Content, steady, whole. Because now my account wasn't just full again. My soul was too.